Hello there, my name is Rena from Carnegie Mellon University, and I'll be presenting my research team's paper called Participation in Division of Labor in User-Driven Algorithm Audits. How do everyday users work together to surface algorithmic harms? As we all know, we're entering into a world permeated with all sorts of algorithms, especially AI-powered ones. But current methods used to audit such algorithms are being outpaced by the development of these algorithms. Current expert-led scientific audits were designed around equal opportunity laws, which discludes other types of harms that can be caused by biased algorithms, such as censoring or harmfully portraying marginalized groups and images. Also, they're historically known to be used to detect statistical disparities rather than unpredictable behavior of machine learning algorithms after they're deployed to the public. And lastly, expert-led audits conducted by organizations may be swayed towards the benefit of the organization rather than the general public. So, how do we move forward? User-driven auditing is a process in which end users organically come together and conduct audits of algorithmic systems to uncover, interrogate, and make sense of potentially harmful machine behaviors they encounter in their everyday lives. These kinds of audits are different from current auditing methodologies, but such audits have already occurred. The Twitter cropping audit case centered around Twitter's former algorithm designed to auto-crop attached images for thumbnail previews. It was found that the algorithm would crop out people of color or treat images of women in an inappropriate manner. The ImageNet roulette case was an online art and social experiment that was created to expose the discriminatory and insulting behavior of the ImageNet dataset. The Apple Card case revealed many instances of wives receiving lower credit limits than their husbands when applying for Apple's new credit card. And lastly, the Portrait AI case involved the algorithm changing the ethnicities of users of color to Caucasian. That's supposed to be Barack Obama, by the way. Not only do these cases of user-driven auditing already exist, but companies like Twitter are already looking into the potential of open-source auditing methods. In 2021, they conducted their first algorithmic bias bounty challenge, which challenged their users to audit and propose solutions to their potentially biased algorithms. Even though these events have already occurred, little is known about the participation patterns and the division of labor among users in these audits, especially when they include a large number of participants. To aid in organizing and supporting users in conducting these kinds of audits, we asked ourselves the following questions. What are the patterns of participation among users in user-driven algorithm audits? Who are the top contributors in these audits? And what are the different roles the tweets play in these audits? To answer these questions, we conducted the following methodology. We collected Twitter data on our 4 audit cases, conducted a qualitative analysis to develop a coding scheme, built a classifier, and then analyzed who the contributors were of our 4 cases. Using keywords and software like Scrape, we retrieved approximately 33,000 tweets from the Twitter REST API from all 4 of our cases. This method introduced a significant amount of noise to our dataset, and we built a relevance classifier to filter some of it out, resulting in a final set of approximately 18,000 tweets. With our final dataset, we conducted a qualitative thematic analysis by open coding 1,800 random tweets from our dataset to develop a mutually exclusive coding scheme to break down the similar division of labor we observed between the different cases. We then built a support vector machine model using this coded sample to classify the remainder of our entire dataset. Our final model had an accuracy measure of 88% with a kappa value of 0.49. Finally, to finish off our data analysis, we ranked contributors by 2 categories. Producers were contributors who produced the most amount of content within their respective case. Broadcasters were contributors who received the most engagement through likes and retweets within their respective case. Within the top 10 contributors of these categories, we further categorized them as either experts who exhibited prior knowledge regarding technology and social issues in their Twitter bio, and influencers who had sizable follower counts. And here's what we found in our analysis. While looking at some plots showing the number of tweets over the length of the case's life, we found that participation typically happened in a singular short burst followed by a long tail of continued labor. The only exception to this was our Portrait AI case, which portrays a much more scattered participation density. And when compared to the other 3 cases, this case had less media coverage and attention, and also has not been addressed by the platform's operator. We also collected a number of descriptive statistics for each of our 4 audit cases, but what we would like to draw attention to is the average number of tweets per participant. Across all the audit cases, most users typically contributed only 1 tweet to the conversation. This finding is consistent with literature on slacktivism, or a low-risk, low-cost activity that's meant to raise awareness, produce change, or grant satisfaction to the person engaged in the activity. Even though 1 tweet may seem insignificant, having a large number of slacktivist tweets in a user-driven audit can be impactful, as seen by Twitter's removal of their cropping algorithm and the removal of data points in the ImageNet dataset. One quote that perfectly sums up this sentiment comes from Cabrera et al. That states, "Sometimes activism in a digital age relies on the slacktivism of the masses." Looking at our top contributors, we found that contributors who produced the most content had little overlap with contributors who garnered the most engagement. Only one contributor from the ImageNet Roulette, Portrait AI, and Apple Card cases were both a top producer and top broadcaster. Also, top contributors, both producers and broadcasters, were often experts and influencers. There was an average of 8 experts out of all the top contributors, and an average of 14 influencers out of all the top contributors across the 4 cases. Lastly, even though it may seem like common sense, top broadcasters received the most engagement and had the most followers. Given these findings, both types of contributors play major roles in the continuation of a user-driven audit. Despite content producers not garnering the most amount of engagement, they create the content that other participants can consume and work off of. And despite content broadcasters contributing little content, they're able to spread the word farther and reach more people. Both kinds of contributors do their part in drawing other users to participate in and run an audit. And finally, after our qualitative analysis of the tweets we collected, our coding scheme ended up including 5 labor rules. Hypothesizing tweets proposed different informal theories about the algorithmic systems they were interacting with. Evidence collection tweets shared evidence that were collected to document a software algorithm's biases. Contextualization tweets placed the ongoing audit into a larger social, technical, or cultural context, broadening the scope of what they're observing. Amplification tweets broadcast and amplify relevant information related to the audit. And finally, escalation tweets react to what's already been presented and are characterized as being emotional and reactive, expressing what the users are feeling about the observed algorithmic behaviors or the ongoing audit. When breaking down what kinds of tweets were posted in their audit cases, we found that escalation tweets made up 69% of all the Twitter cropping tweets, and that amplification tweets made up 85% of all the Apple Card tweets. As shown on the slide, escalation and amplification tweets were very prominent in their respective cases. Knowing this, even though algorithmic audits are historically known to detect statistical discrepancies to prove bias, we saw that user-driven audits do something different. Given that amplification and escalation tweets made up the majority of 2 of our cases, we cannot overlook the significance of spreading the word and emotional expressions in these user-driven audits. These actions stray from an objective methodology and focus more on relationships, responsibilities, emotional expressions, and building communities. But what does this step toward a more subjective process mean? Even though we cannot claim anything, we know that current methodologies are designed to find objective and statistical evidence of harmful behavior, when harmful behavior is an innately subjective experience. And after analyzing these 4 user-driven audit cases, we've observed that these user-driven audits can be an organic way for users to have a voice about their subjective experiences with a potentially biased algorithm and potentially enact change. We're almost there, but before we can conclude our presentation, we need to address the limitations of our understanding of user-driven audits. Firstly, all of our analysis was conducted on Twitter data, and user-driven auditing processes may vary across different platforms. Further work can look into the generalizability of user-driven auditing to other platforms. Secondly, our analysis was very quantitative, which reveals little insight into users' subjective experiences with contributing towards audits. And lastly, we as researchers are not able to completely understand the sentiment and intention of audit participants. This leaves room for future work to delve further into what motivates contributors to participate in user-driven audits. And with that, we've reached the end of our presentation. In this paper, we offered a comparative study of 4 highly visible user-driven auditing cases on Twitter. We discovered participation patterns, a distinction between producers and broadcasters, and labor roles participants take on in a user-driven audit. As our world is transforming to incorporate more and more algorithms, so too do our methods used to mitigate the negative and harmful effects these algorithms may have. User-driven auditing is far from a solution, but is a potential step forward in addressing the issues with our current methodologies. If you would like more information, feel free to check out our paper or reach out to us with any questions. Thank you so much for your time and attention.